Hello everyone and welcome along to your live Sunday edition of the TII podcast. My name is Craig Derrick and I'm your host this evening, and I'm joined by two of our fellow Rangers fans who are missing Spain versus Germany to join us this evening. It was an eventful first half, I think, but we'd much rather be talking about Rangers anyway. First up joining us is Ben. How you doing, Ben?
Yes, good. Looking forward to talking about Rangers after a little break from it.
Yeah, well, it's been a busy week and there's lots to unpack, so plenty to get into. And we're joined by Adam as well. How are you doing, Adam?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, it's nice to be on.
Absolutely. So before we get fired into all things Michael Beale, just a word from our sponsors, Zenith Coins. This podcast is brought to you in association with our friends over at Zenith Coins, who are giving every Rangers fan the opportunity to own their own memorable coin collection. Zenith have created a set of 5 wonderfully crafted coins, each celebrating huge milestones in Rangers' 150-year history. So there's a coin for the founding fathers, there's a coin for Ibrox Stadium, one for the European Cup winning cup squad of Barcelona Bears in 1972. There's a 9-in-a-row coin, a 55th League Championship coin as well, commemorating the win under Steven Gerrard. If you want to find out more, it's a cracking set of coins. I think we've all had a look at them over the last few weeks and months. But if you want to find out more and have a look at them yourself and potentially buy some, head over to the website now, www.zenithcoins.com, and you'll get a look at them over there. Right, onto business and Rangers business. Now, it's been a busy week. I can't believe it was only Monday that Giovanni van Bronckhorst was actually relieved of his position as manager at Rangers. It feels like it's been full on with talk of what's going on, who's going to be the next manager, what's going on at board level, what happened to Gio. Gio's came out today with a statement, a very classy statement, I think, which is what you would expect from Giovanni van Bronckhorst. We all know how nice a guy he is and how much he does love Rangers. I don't think we doubted that at any point. It just wasn't happening on the pitch for him. And it appears within the last hour or so that Rangers are in direct contact with QPR with regards to permission to speak to Michael Beale and that £1.5 million rumoured compensation fee as well. Ben, I'm going to come to you first before we get on to talk about Michael Beale, and that seems to be moving ever closer and probably expecting an announcement in the next day or two in relation to that. But before we get on to that, just on Giovanni van Bronckhorst's statement today, I think, like I said, it was a classy statement, but there are a few things that I think were notably left off. I'm going to come to you with the first of those. Within the statement, he talks about all the highs that we had. He speaks about winning the Scottish Cup. He speaks about reaching the Europa League final in Seville. He also speaks about reaching the Champions League group stage. Funnily, he doesn't talk about what happened in the Champions League group stage, but he talks about actually reaching it. He thanks the fans for their support over the time, but a couple of people he doesn't, a couple of groups of people he doesn't mention. So he doesn't mention the players at all, and he doesn't mention the board. Do you think that's just a sign of, is that what you'd expect from a manager in those kind of statements, considering he's just been sacked, or is that something or a sign of underlying problems? Do you think?
I think a bit of both. I think it's hard to expect him to be thanking a board that's just sacked him after just a year in charge. So I suppose he's rightly maybe feeling a wee bit hurt by that. I do think it was the right decision, but I can understand why he might feel that way a little bit. And I suppose Gio obviously had his faults, but he is definitely right to feel that the players potentially did let him down a little bit. The levels that they reached in Europe and things last season, largely the same group of players, bar a couple. They just didn't seem to be able to get anywhere near those levels. And also domestically, the last few games, they certainly didn't look like a team that were playing and giving everything for that manager.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's definitely the case. And I suppose you would probably expect, if a manager has been sacked, obvious things weren't going well on the pitch probably highly likely things weren't going well behind the scenes as well. So I guess that's kind of something to be said. A wee bit interesting, he doesn't thank Ross Wilson as well. That's probably a sign of something that I think as fans we've been suspecting anyway. Adam, what did you make of the statement? We've got Curry Muncher here giving his very honest view of what the statement was. What did you make of the statement? And it was kind of interesting that Gio highlighted unique challenges that he faced and difficult circumstances as well that he was working in. What did you make of those, and what do you think they could potentially allude to?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of appreciate where the sentiments may be coming from in the comments, but I thought it was a nice enough statement. As we say, I think the guy clearly loves the club, and sadly just didn't work out for him. Obviously, I think it was the right decision, but I think we would all say that we'd rather it gone differently, especially given his history with the club. I mean, the difficult challenges thing, can't quite remember the exact wording of it. I mean, obviously he has spoken about the injuries, and I mean that is at crisis point. I don't think there's any denying. I think that kind of run up to the World Cup was really kind of emphasised that, and had he got through that, he might still have been in a job. But yeah, I think it was he could easily have not written that, I suppose. Even if he was still angry about it, he could have easily just kind of written the first part of that message and said, thanks to everyone, whatever, and sort of. But I think to kind of specifically suggest that he was working in difficult circumstances probably alludes to slightly more than just the injuries, because I mean injuries happen. It's like any football manager that can be a factor in them getting sacked. But I don't really necessarily know if that you just stick it in a statement because your players have been injured. So yeah, I mean, listen, we've spoke about it for months now about kind of recruitment, and maybe he doesn't feel that he was backed properly. That certainly seems to be the sentiment amongst a lot of the fans. So yeah, listen, it's kind of is what it is. Obviously, nobody will really know what the underlying meaning behind it is, apart from Giovanni Van Bronckhorst and maybe some people will feel that it is a dig at them. I'm not sure, but yeah, other than that, I thought it was a kind of standard kind of goodbye statement. But yeah, very kind of interesting that he did sort of allude to it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see I'm already getting stick for the Christmas tree in the comments. This was one that TRM here says the pod the other week. It was actually only Monday that the pod went out. So it shows how long a week it's been in Rangers world. But yeah, the Christmas tree has not been moved. It's there to stay, and we're getting closer to Christmas, so it's definitely more acceptable now than it was on Monday. But yeah, absolutely, the Christmas tree is here to stay, and I hope you all enjoy it. Adam, we'll come back on, I guess, to speak a wee bit about the injuries when we start to look at. I guess most of this pod will be assuming that Michael Beale is about to be appointed as the Rangers manager. That those seem to be all the signs that we've been getting over the last 3 or 4 days. But I think injuries will be one thing that Michael Beale does have to contend with, and we'll look at how that is part of what Michael Beale is coming into and what he needs to do to get us fit and firing again on that side of things. But that's to come later on. Ben, I think if we look at Michael Beale, I don't think he's a unanimous choice amongst the Rangers support. I don't know if there is such a thing, or there ever has been a unanimous thing, a unanimous appointment amongst the Rangers support. But Michael Beale is definitely dividing people more than I thought he potentially would. I think if he had taken over directly after Steven Gerrard, it would be potentially different, because I think it would have been seen as a natural successor side of things. I think there's a lot more issues people have been flagging this week to his appointment now compared to if it was last season or if it was a year ago. I think it was a year and 2 weeks since Gio was appointed in the first time. What's your reaction to his appointment, and what do you think about Michael Beale being the 18th permanent Rangers manager?
Yeah, I'm positive about it. I mean, I'll always back whoever gets a job, unless we're bringing Pedro back. Yeah, I basically I would have taken Michael Beale a year ago, and I feel like he has now got while it's limited, he has got experience now as a number one, so that's a bonus. I don't think we were inundated with brilliant I don't think that unanimous, easy for me to say, candidate was out there, to be honest. I would certainly, if it was the likes of Sean Dyche, Michael Beale over Sean Dyche every day of the week for me. Style of play, I think knowing the club, having contacts with young players, which I feel is a big thing in Beale's corner. And actually the passion that he's shown for the club, having been there before, and really being keen to come back and knowing what this club is all about. I know that other managers can find that out. I know that people will say Gio knew that too. But I think passion is one thing that we really missed under Gio, and I think it's something that Michael Beale will bring in. I don't think we know he's not the finished article, and we know that it will take time, but we're in a position right now where, in my opinion, the league is gone. So we're in a position where we can try and build, and we can sort of take this second half of the season. We're out of Europe. Obviously, we want to try and win the 2 cup competitions. But we have a chance now for him to sort of, assess the squad. We're in transition with the amount of players that are going to be out of contract. So having a manager like that who's going to effectively learn on the job, I think now is a good time to do it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the different reactions that we've seen, even in the comments tonight, to the probable announcement of Michael Beale as the next Rangers manager. Adam, I just want to firstly get your thoughts on Michael Beale, and secondly, I guess a question that I was kind of alluding to earlier on when I was building up to that question to Ben, and RFC 56 has kind of put it forward here in the comment in terms of why didn't we offer him last year? If you could firstly give us your thoughts on Michael Beale, and then kind of give us your thoughts on why he's now better than last year, or is now different to last year, or is it just circumstances that's led to it?
Yeah, so to come on to the first point, kind of similar to Ben, really, where I just think, I think it is at this point important probably just to get behind him. That's not to say that people aren't entitled to sort of criticise the appointment at all, because he was obviously, as a first team manager on his own, is very inexperienced. I think he's managed 21 league games with QPR and that's it. But he's clearly a very well thought of coach. Someone mentioned there was a Graham Doran's interview that went out on Sky Sports. I think it was today. I didn't quite catch the whole thing, but he spoke very highly of him, and I think everyone that kind of seems to be around the guy does. So yeah, from that point of view, I do think that it's a good appointment from a kind of tactical point of view and a coaching point of view, because in that those kind of circles there seems to be no debate over how good he is. In terms of why it didn't happen last year, I mean, obviously I wanted to probably go with Steven Gerrard to Aston Villa. I think that was fair. He also, I'm assuming, wasn't offered the job, so it's kind of thinking in hypotheticals there. I'm not quite sure what the kind of situation was. It seemed like Van Bronckhorst, if I remember rightly, was appointed sort of pretty quickly. So in terms of, is it different now? I suppose it is just circumstance. I can sort of see why it might have felt better had Gerrard left and then Beale come in sort of straight away, because obviously we would have essentially just kept sort of playing the same way without Steven Gerrard as the kind of focal point of all that, as the face of it, as the manager. So to have gone a year under a different manager, there's now new players. It's going to take Beale a bit of time, you would imagine, to get them back to the way that he wants to play. So I can understand why there probably is a wee bit of anxiousness there from the fans, but I can only hope that he is a very good coach. And I think the fact that, although there is that inexperience, I think the fact that he has been at Rangers, although he's not been the face of it in the way that Steven Gerrard was, I think he has at least been in and around the club, and it won't be a shock to him, or it shouldn't be a shock to him, the sort of goldfish bowl of a job that it is. You'll have seen that firsthand, having watched Steven Gerrard do it for 3 years. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we come on to some of the concerns that have been raised this week, I think fairly by by quite a lot of Rangers fans who potentially aren't in favour of Michael Beale. And for the record, to anyone listening, I refuse to call him Mick Beale. I will always refuse to call him Mick Beale, and I will not entertain any comments that do call him Mick Beale. So yeah, just putting that out there just now. But Ben, I want to kind of touch on Gary Campbell's comment there. I was on the podcast on Monday night just after Giovanni Van Bronckhorst had been sacked. I was on with Tommy and Ross, and we were discussing a myriad of options in terms of potential managers and who it could be. I think Michael Beale was the front runner at that point, but I think that was at that point it was just who could potentially take over. I don't think there was an actual front runner at that stage. I think there was the opportunity there for the Rangers board to effectively do it within 24 hours if they wanted to. I find it really interesting that it's now Sunday night. We're heading into tomorrow, a week on from Giovanni Van Bronckhorst being sacked. You would like to think that when they sacked or took the decision to sack Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, sorry, I was getting tripped over his name there. When they took the decision to sack him, they would have already been pretty far down their planning for who they wanted to speak to and who they wanted to interview. I think it's interesting that we're now 6 days, nearly 7 days on, and there's not been an announcement made. Do you think that is almost to show that they did take their time to consider other options or all the options that were out there that they saw fit to, or do you think it's more just a process thing that's led to it being this long?
I think that's a good point that Gary makes, and it is a concern that I had as well. But I think it can only mean that we have, looked at our options as well. I think there's two points to it. I think, yes, one, we have looked at other people, and I think that's important. If we had just gone for our ex-assistant and whatever, it doesn't show the board in a good light. It doesn't show planning. It doesn't show that we're looking widely like we should be for a manager of a club like ours. But also, the one thing that I would say is I didn't think it looked wonderful on Beale being at that Aberdeen game. And I think had we sacked Gio on the Monday and appointed him the day after or that day or within 24 hours, as you say, I don't think that would have been the greatest look either. So I think sort of given a little bit of time to sort of say we've looked, we've taken a look at our options. It is the right way. You don't want to rush in because things go wrong. Hopefully they don't, but if things go wrong and it's the people be hitting them with that stick that, you sure you just took the first person that was available. So I think it would be negligent, and I think this board have many faults, but I would like to think that they would have considered other options as well. Yeah,
I'm the same, and I think when we saw pictures of Stuart Robertson, of Ross Wilson, and the departure lounge at Glasgow Airport heading down to London, I think we knew they were heading to interview some potential candidates. I think the concern was that it was Michael Beale and only Michael Beale that they were heading to interview. I would like to think that hasn't been the case, and there's been a reason as to why they've only formally approached QPR either yesterday or today, depending on who you listen to in terms of the media. So I think that gives me reassurance, I guess, that the board have taken their time and have considered their options. But I think I think Michael Beale will always potentially be tarnished with the tag of being the easy option or the lazy option by some fans, and I guess it's a wee bit of a concern that he starts off on the wrong foot on that side of things. But I'm sure all fans will get behind them because we're all working towards, or we all want the same common goal, which is effectively Rangers winning league trophies, Rangers winning cup trophies, and Rangers doing well in Europe. And I think that's ultimately where we all want to get to, and Michael Beale will be no different. Adam, I'm just going to come to you for the first of these. We'll start talking about some of the concerns that were raised this week by fans. You may have your own concerns that you want to kind of throw in around here. The first one that I've seen thrown about, and it's actually one of the concerns I have, is just the links to the Gerrard era. I think I'm always wary about people going back to somewhere they've been before. And I don't think this is, although it's a different role he's coming back in, I'm not sure this is entirely different. obviously under Gerrard had to build a team pretty much from scratch after the Pedro Caixinha era. He was given time to do it. Ultimately, he won us, or he took us to the 55th title, which obviously meant so much to so many Rangers fans. But I guess one of the concerns is we won throughout Gerrard's time with the club and Michael Beale's time with the club. We won 1 trophy out of 9. Understanding that we did have to rebuild the squad during that time. We struggled a bit against the low block, especially towards the end. Start of last season, we were really struggling to break teams down. We were conceding the first goal. I think we conceded the first goal in something crazy, like first 9 games or something like that of the season. It was something mental. But on the flip side, I guess, you've seen our performances against Celtic under Giovanni van Bronckhorst and our performances against Celtic under Steven Gerrard, Michael Beale were night and day compared to those that we've seen over the last year or so. Is that a concern you have in terms of the being here before, coming back, links to some of the struggles that we had during that time as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think someone kind of alluded to it in the comments that particularly that lead up to Gerrard's departure, the football wasn't great, despite the fact that I think he left them top of the league. So, it wasn't all kind of perfect under Gerrard and Michael Beale. Obviously, those first 2 years, pretty much, there was an acceptance of how long it was going to take to get the squad back to a title-winning team. And then the fact that he did, I think, perhaps doesn't obscure memories, but the 55th title is the first thing that you think of, or it's certainly the first thing I think of when you think of Steven Gerrard, rather than some of the kind of poor performances that we had under him. In terms of your concern, Craig, about someone going back, I do understand that. I mean, it's obviously also going to be different because, everyone talks about how, I think there was all this kind of chat about Michael Beale taking all the training sessions, etc. And perhaps, I think, particularly when Gerrard was at Villa, there was maybe some chat that he really struggled without Michael Beale. But the fact was that as a manager, and in terms of the mentality that Gerrard instilled into the players, I mean, that all came from him, from Steven Gerrard. His very presence, as the player that he was, I think, came from there. Whether Michael Beale, I think that is more my concern on that side in terms of his personality as a manager. Listen, I'm not going either way on it because I don't know enough about the guy to kind of say that. I think with Gerrard, despite the fact that it was his first job, because of the player that he was, everyone kind of thought from that point of view, I don't think there was really too many concerns. So, yeah, I think for me it is that just lack of experience as the front man of Rangers. And to kind of contradict myself slightly, I know I said that he'd watched Gerrard do it for 3 years, but you probably really, really don't understand it until you've actually done it. Because although when Gerrard came in for criticism, that obviously does, I'm sure Beale and Gary Mack, etc., all felt anxious at the time, but really it was Steven Gerrard that would take the hits on that one. Beale is probably now going to have to do that at some stage over the course of the next 6 months, because as Ben said earlier, I think getting the league back is going to be difficult. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of concerns, and I think it is a really difficult one in terms of how optimistic we all feel if and when he is given the job. I think it is when at this point. But then at the same time, on the flip side of that, he has got a huge chance when he comes in. I think 3 of the first 5 games are Hibs, Aberdeen and Celtic. So, it's like classic Rangers scenario where he's sort of 2 games away from this is the wrong appointment, but then potentially 2 games away from, maybe things are looking up a little bit. So, yeah, I completely appreciate people's concerns on it, but I think at this moment in time, he is the sort of obvious and correct candidate for me. And so I think I have to try and think towards that side of things, but that's not to say that I don't have any concerns about that lack of experience as a manager.
Yeah, we'll come back onto the lack of experience because that's kind of the next point that we've got. But Ben, just before we do, just want to touch on Aldo's comment there. People seem to fantasize about style of play under the regime Beale was involved in due to 55. At times under that regime, it was as predictable and as hard to watch as it was under Gio. I think we've all seen, as rumours of Beale's appointment have grown and grown and grown, we've all seen the Galatasaray goal about 40 times this week on social media. I guess that's one of the that's one of the best examples of the type of goal that we did score, and we've not really been scoring since Giovanni Van Bronckhorst took over. I guess the Ryan Kent's goal against Royal Antwerp as well was another example of how we were able to play through teams. But like I said, when I was asking Adam his question, we did struggle, especially towards the start of last season before Gerrard and Beale left for Villa. We were really struggling against the low block. Do you have not concerns about that we'll just revert back to the same style of play and teams will already have worked us out because they worked us out last time? Or do you think Beale will try and almost refresh his approach and he will have learned from his time at Villa and his short time at QPR?
Yeah, I think he'll have to be flexible, but I think that's what a good coach is, and I think he's a good coach, and I think I agree it wasn't perfect, and particularly the start of last season towards the end of their reign. It wasn't great. And as you say, we were conceding the first goal quite a lot, and we were struggling to break teams down. But I think there's a lot of factors for that. I think we didn't refresh the squad enough after winning the league, is one thing. And I think the football under Gio for quite a lot of his time, to be honest with you, it was a chore to watch Rangers. Whereas I wouldn't say that about the time. Yes, there were games where it wasn't great, but I mean that's going to be the case. We're not going to be perfect. So I have more confidence that Beale can get us playing good football, because I think we did play good football under that regime more than we didn't. So I'd be positive, thinking about that.
Yeah, I think it's. You do, I suppose you always do remember the best times under certain managers. I suppose it depends how their reign ends. I'm not sure with Pedro Caixinha if there were any best times, but I guess you do always tend to remember the more positive things. And like with Steven Gerrard and Michael Beale's time with the club, you do remember that 55th title, as Adam says. That's kind of the first thing you jump to, and then you jump to our form in Europe and how we were playing against teams. And whereas I guess with Giovanni Van Bronckhorst and his departure, it's like, yeah, he took us to Seville, but also we struggled a lot in the league and we're not aggressive enough, and he plays a horseshoe, and it kind of just shows the difference in terms of how fans were viewing it, despite reaching a European final 6 months ago, which is still feels like a lifetime ago, to be fair. Ben, just sticking with you for your first kind of view on this one. One of the other criticisms of Michael Beale is that he's an unproven manager. Ultimately, he's had 10 to 15 games as a manager for QPR. He's already been approached and turned down the Wolves job, which got him a lot of headlines and a lot of stick. He's obviously been a coach for so many years. He's been to so many different countries as well. He spent a lot of time in Brazil. He was coach with Chelsea. He was coach with a number of other clubs before coming to us as well. Does his lack of experience cause you concern, or even the way the form has turned around? I think QPR started the season off absolutely flying. The first 5-6 games, they were top of the championship, which I don't think they've been for quite a considerable length of time. And then the last 5 games they've played, they've lost 4 out of the 5. They've scored 1 goal in 5 games. Does it look like he's jumping ship before it gets even worse? So where do you lie on that side of things?
Yeah, his experience is a slight concern. I would love us to be bringing in a manager that's won title after title in several different countries and that, but they're just not out there for us right now. Michael Beale has vast experience, obviously not as a number one, but coaching, as you've said there, in several different countries, and is widely respected. I think, Steven Gerrard didn't have much experience today either. I think one of the important things is who he brings in as his staff. I think having that experience of like Gerrard bringing in Gary Mack and stuff, although he hadn't been manager, he was widely experienced in the game, and I think he needs to bring in someone like that. It doesn't necessarily need to be. I'm not totally of the opinion that it has to be an ex-Rangers player or whatever, but just somebody who has experience in the game would benefit him. I think. As for the QPR, yes, their form has dipped. I think with the squad that they had, I don't think it was ever gonna stay as top as it was for the start of the season, all season. I think that championship is a very, very up and down league, and you will go through periods. And particularly, I suppose, there's no doubt that once your manager's been approached by somebody, it will unsettle things a little bit. So I don't really think he's jumping as such. I think, as he said himself, Rangers is too big to turn down, and he couldn't turn it down. So I think if there's another club, he may well have turned it down, as he's proven in the past.
Yeah, Adam, I just want to pick up on one thing Ben said there, because it was something that both Tommy and Ross and myself discussed on Monday's podcast. There was a lot of shouts in the comments on Monday for need to have an ex-Rangers man in there, or need to have someone that knows Scottish football. I've seen even some suggestions today or over the last couple of days that Kevin Thompson should be part of Michael Beale's coaching setup. I'm left in no doubt that Michael Beale will have his own choices as to who he wants to be part of his setup, and I'm sure they will have been part of his requirements before he signs on the dotted line. How do you feel about needs to be someone that knows the league, or someone that knows the club in there beside him?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I think is a must, really. I mean, if the person can bring something to the staff, then of course they should be appointed, but they shouldn't be appointed solely on the basis that they are ex-Rangers. So I don't really see that argument so much. I mean, Steven Gerrard didn't know Scottish football, and he won a league title. I appreciate it took those 2 years, but I will always defend those first 2 years under Steven Gerrard. It's just such a big rebuild was needed. Listen, people might not like this, but ultimately you have to compare yourself to the other side of the city as well. They appointed a manager who didn't exactly, I think everybody was Googling him, to be fair. When he came in, nobody really knew a huge amount about him. He hadn't managed in Scotland, obviously has more experience than Michael Beale, but, didn't exactly stop him from doing the job that he's done. So I wouldn't suggest that it's necessarily crucial to have somebody who knows the club. I think there's probably an argument that it's maybe refreshing if they don't necessarily, just because they can come in with a really fresh set of eyes. I know that Michael Beale has been there, but let's face it, things have changed that much in the even just year that he's been away that it will feel like a fresh start for him, and he'll be the manager with kind of new backroom staff. So no, obviously if there is somebody, whether it's Kevin Thompson or someone else who can bring something to the coaching setup, then yeah, obviously fair enough. But the fact that they're ex-Rangers, for me, isn't necessarily crucial to getting them in there.
Yeah, Ben, one of the things Adam mentioned there was about the fact he'll always defend the first 2 years under Steven Gerrard, because there did have to be a rebuild. Do we almost find ourselves a year after they left in the same position, that we have to rebuild again? We've got a really bloated squad. We've got a lot of injuries within that squad. We've got a lot of players who are consistently injured but are tied down to long-term contracts, at least for the next 18 months or so. Are we almost at the stage where Michael Beale's coming back again a year after he left to help us rebuild a squad again? And is there a concern? This is one of the concerns that I think a few people have mentioned, that he's too friendly with some of the players in the current squad, and there's a concern that he'd be friendly enough that he wouldn't want to cut them adrift. I think you're talking about guys like potentially Alan McGregor or Stephen Davis or Scott Arfield, or guys who are reaching the end of their sort of Rangers career as such. Is that a concern you have, or do you think he does have that ruthless streak within him?
Well, I think he's coming in. He's taking this job to make it a success. He's not going to say, right, listen, McGregor's my mate, so I'm going to keep him another 2 years. He wants to have the best goalkeeper that's going to make his team the best, or Steve Davis or whoever that is. So no, I'm not worried about that. He's a professional. He's experienced enough to know what he needs in this team. In terms of the rebuild, I think yes and no. I think when Steven Gerrard came in, Steven Gerrard had to rebuild the club, in my opinion. He had to put the club back onto that European stage. He had to, improving the training ground. So many things like that, even from Bisgrove and stuff coming in around those times, and improving the club on a corporate level as well. was important, and even Europe bringing in the finances. So we're on a better footing as a club, but as a squad, when Steven Gerrard came in, I don't like saying this at all, but we were miles away from them across the city in terms of squad and in terms of playing ability. And I sadly think we are again. I just don't think our squad comes close to what theirs has. I mean, they've spent more money than us, so it's going to be that way. So I think in terms of playing, we are at a rebuild stage, especially with contracts coming up and players that have been there and have gone stale, been there too long. So yeah, there's a big rebuilding job, but that's why I feel it's a good time to go for a manager like this.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. One of the things that I was going to touch on later, but I think it fits quite well now, is around if we do, obviously a new manager comes in, the vast majority of people's instant reaction is, well, if a new manager comes in the next transfer window, we're going to be spending millions and millions of pounds as he gets in the players that he does want, and he will get rid of the players that he doesn't want. I don't think that's quite as easy for a January window as it is for a summer transfer window. I mentioned before that we've got the sort of overinflated squad size. It's quite bloated compared to where you would probably want it to be. You've got a high wage bill. We've got some players coming towards the end of their contracts, like Morelos and Kent. We've got a squad that's been underperforming, really, from where we expect them to be, and there's a lot of injuries in there as well. Do you expect us to spend good money in January, or do you actually think it'll be a bit of a maybe add one or two, but the real work will be done in the summer?
Yeah, certainly the second point there, Craig. I really don't think it will be a crazy busy January. I mean, you would like to think that those one or two, even if it is just one or two, will be players that make an impact straight away. Listen, we all can debate the situation financially. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know what it is. Obviously, none of us in that sense know the exact figures. I don't know how much money there is to spend. We've qualified for the Champions League. We've had sales recently. It does seem a bit up in the air at the minute, but if you're asking how much I think we're going to spend in January, I don't think it's going to be anything near enough to consider the squad sort of rebuild complete at that point. I think just to kind of touch on something that Ben said that is interesting though, is that in going back to the kind of Gerrard era, is he had to rebuild, like, I think it was a nice point of saying rebuild the club, because the mentality that you expect from Rangers was just not there at all. I think what Beale has now is a chance to get those players, in that time, Tavernier, Goldson, they've won league titles, they've been to European finals, got the cup hoodoo off their back as well, which I think, just briefly to go back to Van Bronckhorst, is something I will remember because it had been a decade. So, fair play to him on that front as well, I think. But yeah, to bring it back to Beale now, I think it's as much of a part of that rebuild is just reminding those players of actually how mentally strong we have seen them be. I don't think it's necessarily just a rebuild in terms of like it was under Gerrard, where it was literally like clear the decks and get so many new players in. I think it's as much about getting players who we know are capable of. I mean, they were in a European final 6 months ago, like you say, Craig. It feels about 10 years ago now, but that is as much a part of it as anything else, I would say. So as much as we are very rightly going to talk about who we bring in and who goes, because there are a lot of players to go at the minute and there's players out of contract, so it is going to be quite a hectic 6 months, you would imagine. I think as much of the rebuild is about working with what he's got and getting players back to their best as it is bringing in a couple of people in January.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, I think the last point thrown against Michael Beale, or the potential point on Michael Beale, is I guess the word loyalty comes into it, but I'm not really sure that's the correct word to use. But I think just the whole situation where he was only been QPR manager since the summer. He's been 10 to 15 games into that. I looked up today, it was 32 days ago that he said he made a statement saying that he was turning down Wolves because he was all in at QPR and he couldn't run out the door and leave all the people who he'd asked to go all in with him at the club. I do wonder what's changed in those 32 days. I know as Rangers fans, we like to think that the appeal of the club and the stature of the club is what draws him. And I do think that I think he's always had in his head probably that he wants to come back to to manage Rangers, and he's probably wondered or even thought, is this the only chance I'm going to get, so I'm going to take it? But does that even come into your thinking as a Rangers fan about it's been a negative point, or is it just that it's by the by and he's the Rangers manager and that's what's important?
Yeah, I'm not that worried about it. I think he openly said that he couldn't ever turn down Rangers, and he's proven that. But I think people make too much of this loyalty in football. If he started his QPR job and he lost the first 10 games, they wouldn't have been thinking about loyalty when they binned him. So opportunities come, and he could turn down Rangers now, and he might never get that chance again. So you have to take the opportunity. I mean, it's the sort of food chain, isn't it? We didn't like it when Gerrard chose to leave us, and QPR probably won't like it now. But that's what happens if a bigger club comes along. Or I'm not saying Aston Villa are a bigger club than us, but the Premier League, the lure of the Premier League obviously came along, and going back to Rangers, to a huge institution, he can't turn it down, and I don't blame him.
Yeah. So we've spoken about quite a few of the concerns that we've seen raised over the past week or so. Let's look at some of the positives, I guess, Adam, of him coming back. He knows and he loves the club. He understands the expectations that we have as fans. He understands the expectations that are placed on any manager that walks through those doors and takes charge of the club. Like we spoke about earlier with the Galatasaray goal and the Royal Antwerp goal, and some of the performances against Celtic as well. He did have us playing attractive football, and we were always up for the fight. I think that's one of the accusations that's been levelled at Gio's team, especially this season, is that they've just seemed to have surrendered before they've even kicked a ball in some games, especially the Champions League games. And I don't think that's anything we saw in a single game under Steven Gerrard over the course of the 3 years. For that one, he seems to be able to get more out of players than we have seen over the last year, particularly looking at guys like Glenn Kamara, who was a standout over the 3 years under Steven Gerrard, and Michael Beale, and he's faded into almost non-existent at the club at the moment. It'll be interesting to see if we see sort of his Rangers career resurrected, or if really last summer was the time he should have probably left alongside sort of Aribo and Bassey and left with our best wishes. He's also got a good track record of developing young players, which I don't think should be underestimated, especially with the likes of Tillman in there. I know some people, I'm kind of past the point of hoping with Ravi Matondo, but some people think Ravi Matondo can still offer something. He just needs a bit of help and guidance. I think that's some of the positives that I've thought about over the past week or so with Michael Beale's appointment. Where do you see the positives lying, and where do you see some real reasons for optimism?
Yeah, well, definitely from a coaching point of view, I don't think any of us have any concerns. He's so well thought of, and I know we've had some comments quite rightly mentioned that some of it wasn't great in those first couple of years that they were in the job. But the parts of it that were, if he can bring that back, which you would like to think he could do, because as I say, I don't think the rebuild job is quite as big as it was when him and Gerrard first walked in the door, then I think there's definitely cause for optimism there. To talk about the young players as well, he has got a good track record there, which, it's quite an exciting time from that point of view at Rangers. We've seen Leon King getting a lot of minutes. There's obviously a lot of hype around Alex Lowry and guys like Charlie McCann, etc. So, you would like to think that they will kick on under him. And yeah, I think in general it's important to try and be optimistic in that sense, and that he will bring back a good style of play, because it has been quite abject at times domestically under Van Bronckhorst, and domestically it's just going to be so important. I mean, breaking down teams is what we've struggled with now for months, and I think I've seen a good tweet that said nothing sums up Van Bronckhorst's tenure better than, I think they beat Dortmund in Dortmund and then drew 2-2 with Motherwell or something like that. I mean, that really does sum it up. So yeah, I think there is cause for optimism from that point of view. The most important thing is seeing if we can break down these low blocks that we've just been struggling against so much, and really bring back a real sense of intensity, I think. And I don't sometimes like to label that word at players, because you really don't want to think that they're not given 100% effort. I mean, only the players will be able to tell you if they are or aren't. And we spoke earlier about how Van Bronckhorst didn't, thank the players. Maybe that's reading a bit too much into it. I'm not sure. So yeah, that obviously needs to be brought back, and I have faith that he will be able to do that. And these first 5 games, particularly the 3 as I mentioned, Hibs, Aberdeen, and Celtic, will be an indicator of that. I think that those are just so crucial. As I said, in sort of classic Rangers fashion, he comes in and he's 2 games away from a crisis, pretty much, depending on how things go. So yeah, I think I'm more on the side of, although I kind of echo a lot of the concerns that have been put towards him, I'm more on the side of being optimistic than not.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously Hibs and Aberdeen, the sort of first 2 games back. You never know, we might just tap up Ryan Porteous and that will help us along the way after the news this week. Ben does not look impressed at all.
No, he doesn't. I'm reading the comments off.
It was a joke, for clarification. It was a joke. Ben, before we come on to look at sort of Michael Beale's, I keep going to call him Mick Beale after having that rant earlier on it. Before we come on to Michael Beale's sort of priority list of things that he needs to that he'll want to start to fix straight away, what conditions do you think he'll, if you're in Mick Beale, if you're in Michael Beale's position, what conditions or what expectations would you have put forward to the board that you would need to have before you signed on that dotted line?
I would need to know that I'm going to be able to pick my players that I'm bringing in, because that's the question. Of course, we don't know for sure that wasn't the case, but the players that came in didn't look to me that they were Gio's players. I could be wrong, but basically knowing that he has the authority to pick his own players, is a big one, and knowing what he's going to be able to do, because there is a rebuild, and knowing that, although I don't think there's going to be 10 million, available immediately, I think it's important that he knows that there is going to be some funds available, because we need them. Let's face it.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, same question to you. What do you think Michael Beale's expectations would be, or his conditions, I guess, for signing on the dotted line?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of similar to Ben, just that he is going to have the full backing of the board. I mean, we spoke earlier about, how bizarre it is that squad was in such a good position going into the season after Steven Gerrard won the league. And we're now, that was a chance to really kick on. And we're now back in a position where Beale has got to come in and kind of think about getting the squad back to that and getting his own players and getting quality players in to improve the squad. We've obviously sold Aribo and Bassey. I don't have an issue with that. They had to be sold with the money that was offered and the fact that they probably wanted to move on anyway. But the fact that they weren't really properly replaced with players that offered as much, if not more quality than them, because they were good players. But, the greatest of respect to them, fantastic guys, but there are probably better players out there that could have been brought in to replace them or at least match them. And I think that's one thing with Beale, is that is not his fault, that there's a much wider discussion that we could have here and have had about the fact that the board hasn't kicked on from that title-winning season. We have definitely taken it a step backwards in spite of a Europa League final, but that kind of was very much a against all odds tale. So, yeah, it's really just the board need to just give Michael Beale the backing to build a squad and create a team that is his vision. And then that way, from the board's point of view, all the pressure in that sense can be put on to Beale. If they give him that back and they give him the players and they say, well, there you go, it's then fully down to him to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mandy Thompson comes in there with a comment: Beale needs to pick his own players 100%, and Ross Wilson must go. Then Robertson, after what he said about the fans keeping the club in the dark ages, disgraceful. I think I'd fully agree that Michael Beale needs to pick his own players. I think I do understand why we do have the director of football system. Jury's out for me, I think, on Ross Wilson. I think he's done some good, but he's done a lot of bad in there as well with the players that have been brought in. So definitely going to be a big January transfer window and probably summer transfer window, if we're honest, for both Michael Beale and for Ross Wilson. Ben, if we start to look ahead to, assuming that Michael Beale was appointed tomorrow, Tuesday, from what I understand, the players return to training on Wednesday. Gives us 3 weeks, I think. Just over 2 weeks until we take on Hibs on Thursday, the 15th of December. What should his priority list be when he gets there to fix things and to try and turn things around quickly? Should it be the fitness thing? We know the fitness side of things has been called into question a lot this year. Should it be attitude, formation, work rate, tactics? Where there's so many places you could start. Where do you think where do you think the quick wins are, I guess, for him?
It's a difficult one because as you say, there's so much that needs done. I think I don't think that we're not fit enough. I think attitude was certainly lacking, or belief. I think when your manager comes out, particularly I'm talking Champions League, when your manager comes out and says we can't compete at this level, the players might be saying, well, we can't compete at this level, and that affects the work rate. And when we were end up getting thrashed in those, it's going to dent confidence. So what he needs to do is try and pick those players back up, but by having a conversation with the senior players to say what has been going on, what's been going wrong is important. But I think one of the important things that he needs to do, not necessarily with a view to the first games, but with a view to assessing the squad, is sitting down with the players that are going to be out of contract and getting, finding out where their heads are at. What was it that they didn't like Gio? Was that why Kent has been missing for so long? Morelos, I'm wondering if there is hope for it at all. But he needs to sit down and find out, because if those players are indicating that they don't want to be part of it, then we need to get whatever we can for them in January so that we can reinvest that. So I think assessing things like that is very, very important for him. And I think something that's not internal within the squad, I think what he needs to do as well is be using his contacts, which I'm sure he will, with those sort of cross-border signings. I know that he has a lot of contacts in London and things like that. And what I found interesting was when I know Ross Wilson stayed as director of football, but whenever Gerrard and Beale and that regime left, those signings seemed to stop, whereas they were so key during that period, that it makes me think that their influence in them was huge. So I think those are going to be very important because we don't have the most money in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I get your thoughts on it, Adam, we get all sorts of comments on here. Spoke about the Christmas tree at the start. I'm going to bring this one up, saying you look like Tobey Maguire. Are you accepting that? Are you accepting that?
I'll accept that. He's the best Spider-Man for me, so I'll accept it. Maybe that'll cause even more controversy.
Yeah, that might cause more controversy. Yeah.
Yeah, so, the best. So yeah, that's a huge compliment. So. Yeah.
So CRS Adam will send you a DM after the show, and you can get sorted on that front. Just on back to I guess what Michael Beale's first priorities will be when he comes in as manager. Where do you think they lie? Do they lie, like Ben said, with attitude, or do they lie sort of that planning for signings? I imagine we're going to change style a little bit. Maybe not necessarily the formation itself, but how the players move and interact within that formation, I think will probably change. Where do you see his priorities being for the next 2 weeks or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think those kind of first two things about the sort of attitude and the tactics are probably connected, because I think we need to have a style back that is built on a bit more intensity. And by playing with more intensity, I think it will be easier to look at them and see that there is a better attitude there, because if you're playing with more intensity, then naturally that would suggest that you are putting in a bit more effort. He is the best Spider-Man. Yep, let's clear that up briefly. So yeah, I think from that point of view, that will be the first thing, because he is really going to have to hit, the ground running. I mean, the games will start. You'll have a couple of weeks there to kind of get that built in, get a style in that 2 weeks leading up to it, basically get a style in before the Hibs game starts, rather than sort of having to come in and just like the first game's on the Saturday. I think that's why that's probably the priority, because he has got that couple of weeks. So sorry, I'm just keeping my eye on the comments.
It's gone all sorts. And
easy to lose your train of thought, and then as we go forward, I think Ben is completely right that we need to just, even if it is just forward planning in January, not necessarily some of the players that are going to depart maybe are going to go in January because they're either still injured or we can't get them out the door, whatever it may be. I'm thinking of people like Hollander, for example, who, I mean, let's face it, is a club going to take the guy with how injury prone he is if he can't get back to his best? So, but for me, that first thing immediately is to get back a style that will just win games of football and win them convincingly. Because even I was looking back through those last few results, like with Van Bronckhorst, you look at the wins and even the 1-0 over Hearts, etc., really wasn't convincing. So I think that's the kind of first thing that needs to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we're almost at the end of tonight's podcast. So just one last thing I wanted to discuss. We've obviously seen with Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's contract length and the potential issues that has presented when it hasn't worked out in terms of the financial I can't even say that word. Paying him off effectively we'll go for. So in terms of the amount of money we would have to pay him and his staff, I believe will just be paying up his contract as is, and he'll get this money monthly or weekly or however it is we pay him to the end of his contract. We've seen a sort of, I guess, an approach across the other side of the city that's been whatever manager comes in, no matter if it's Brendan Rodgers, if it's Neil Lennon, if it's Ange Postecoglou, they get a 12-month rolling contract, at least for the first 2 years, I think, and then they start to build, and that almost gives them a bit of wiggle room as such, in terms of if it doesn't work out, they can make a quick change and it won't cost them a lot of money. I saw some comments earlier on when we were discussing it that they're expecting a 3-year contract for Michael Beale. I don't know how accurate that is, or if that was a sort of pot shot at how long the contract would be. Ben, would you favour moving towards that 12-month rolling contract side of things? And if you did, do you think that's actually a condition that a lot of managers would actually accept, or do you think they would expect a more detailed term instead of 2, 3, 4 years?
I mean, ideally I would, but I suppose if you want to show that you've got real faith and confidence in him, a manager's going to want 2-3 years, especially if they're leaving another club for that. But yeah, from the club's point of view, it covers you. So if things don't go well, then you're not doing what we're doing right now and paying a previous manager. So yeah, I would like to do that, but I can see it from the point of view where they're wanting more backing than that, a manager.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I favour more the approach towards the 12-month rolling contract, just because of the volatility of football as it is today. We saw how quickly it turned on Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, I guess, from that first kick-off against Ajax onwards. It kind of turned massively quickly, and you could tell it was never going to recover. And I think it's quite easy for that to happen to any manager, not just Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. So I would probably favour the 12-month rolling contract, at least to start off anyway. We've got Callum C coming in there saying he would give a 0 contract to the manager, which I'm not sure anyone in life should take, never mind a football manager.
I think Mike Ashley's gone now, so
yeah. So Adam, just to close out the podcast, just your thoughts on that sort of contract approach as a club. Do you think the concern is that we just keep finding ourselves out within that cycle of getting a manager and staying for a year, 18 months, and then you've got to pay off the second half of his contract or whatever? Where do you stand on that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, football is so unpredictable that you could do it once and it would really work out quite well, but then you could do it another time and it might not. For example, if Beale was only on a 12-month rolling contract and things were to be going well, then a club could just poach him in the summer for free, effectively, without any kind of compensation fee. At the same time, if things weren't going well, it would perhaps keep the board on their toes, in the sense that I know football clubs probably have this anyway, but just kind of have a list of managers there as backup and be a bit quicker to kind of come in that sense. Not that this hasn't been quick. I mean, I suppose it's only been a week, but just to kind of have an idea of, really there's always kind of if a change does have to be made, which it inevitably will at some stage, that's what happens in football, then it can be done quite smoothly. So I think, not to massively just sit on the fence. I do think there are pros and cons to it. Maybe though, to kind of actually pick a side, it's time for maybe a bit of a change in that sense. It's maybe worth a go. And I suppose if Michael Beale backs himself, which he should obviously, if he's going to take the Rangers job, then a 12-month rolling contract, he might think, well, yeah, that's fine, because in 12 months I'll have done a good enough job that you can then back me with an extra year, an extra 2 years. So someone did put in quite a good idea there, though, a sort of 2-year deal option with another year if he does well, maybe something like that. So perhaps make that slightly less and say, 12 months, but, you get the option of the extra year so long as everything does go well in that sense. So, yeah, I think pros and cons to it definitely, but I would probably come down on your side, Craig, in the sense that it's maybe worth just trying at this moment in time because of what we've seen recently.
Yeah, I think Steven Gerrard was our longest serving manager for 3 years or just over 3 years, and he was the longest serving manager by quite a considerable way in recent times. So I think that's just a sign of potentially where the club has been, but also how volatile we can be as a support and how quickly our minds or thoughts towards the team or the manager can change depending on what is happening on the park. But thank you very much, guys, for joining us. Just going to round off the podcast there. Fully expecting Michael Beale to be revealed or announced as the Rangers manager probably tomorrow, which will be Monday, but potentially Tuesday at the latest. But thank you very much, Ben, for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Enjoyed it. And
same to you, Adam. How was it being in the contributor chair rather than the host chair?
Yeah, no, it was good. A lot less pressure. So good to be back. Thanks for having me.
It's been good to have you back. And thank you very much, everyone else, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the TII YouTube channel and toggle on those notifications as well, so you get an email every single time we go live. As we spoke about at the start, it's World Cup time. I think Spain and Germany's just finished in the last 5 minutes or so. I won't ruin the score for anyone like Ben that's got it on record, but we are on a reduced schedule as a result of that World Cup break. So we're next live on Wednesday, albeit if Michael Beale is announced as Rangers manager, we will be live with a sort of immediate reaction podcast to that as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But next planned live show is on Wednesday night, and the team will be back with you then. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. And until next time, goodbye.